All right. Hi, everyone. I hope you guys can hear me. It is 7:30, so why don't we begin? All right. So I see that more friends have joined us on YouTube as well as WeChat. Welcome, welcome. All right. Today we're going to be talking about the selection round for GEP, better known as the GEP round 2. All right. So I believe you guys probably have some questions about the tests, or you might even have questions about the GEP itself. At the end, I will be very happy to answer any questions. And along the way, as we speak about the selection round, feel free to type your questions into the chat box. We will collect them and I will answer all of them towards the end of our seminar. All right, so welcome everybody. Today, Think Academy presents more information about GGEP selection round. If you want to know how to get in, what exactly is tested, and what comes after the selection round, you are in the right place, my friends. So let us begin. Before we start, maybe I should probably introduce myself. All right, so my name is Belinda. Some of you might have students in my classes, right? Or some of your kids might have attended my classes in the previous years. So a little bit more about me. I am a master math teacher at Think Academy, and I'm very passionate about math. So a bit more about my background. I graduated a few years ago from Princeton. And before that, I was from RI, RGS, and earlier, very, very early on, the GEP program in Nanyang. So if your kids do get into GEP, you could probably think of me as like your many, many years senior. But to be honest, the contents of the GEP has not changed that much, even past the past decade or the past 2 decades. So I think whatever my experience was with my class back then is probably still quite applicable to whatever your kids will experience when they get into GEP. So a bit more about my accomplishments, right? So I was in the GEP program for 3 years from P4 to P6. Overall, I scored 276 in PSLE. I bet many kids, if you're watching this, you don't even know what 276 is, right? Because back then, PSLE was scored on a T-score system. Right now, probably it's the equivalent of your AL4 or AL5, right? I also did a lot of math Olympiad in primary school. So I'll be talking a little bit about how my math Olympiad experience also translated into a slightly easier time in the GEP. So let's start, all right? We're not here to talk about me. I'm sure you guys are more interested in learning more about the GEP, but I want to know more about you guys to begin. All right, so you are mostly students and parents who are interested in the GEP, and I bet many of you have taken the GEP round 1 that just passed a few days ago, right? So how do you guys find the paper? Like, I heard from most of my students that math was really easy and English is really hard. But then again, I'm a math Olympiad teacher, so I don't know if that's like representative, right? So this one, I bet your kids are mostly 9. Maybe some people are a little bit younger if you're interested ahead, right? But how confident is everybody in getting past round 1? I wish I could see your responses. I'm not sure if you guys can like give me the response on YouTube, but I'm sure many people here, if you're here, you're at least fairly confident of getting past round 1, right? You can ask yourself these questions then, and will you accept the GEP offer if your child gets in? So you'd be surprised. A lot of parents ask me year after year, like, oh, if I want to try it for the experience, but I'm not certain about pushing my child for the GEP, you're free to decline the offer if you really do get in. So now, right, this is what we're going to be covering today. We're going to talk about the logistics of the GEP, so some general information. Then I'll give you the differences. I bet that's what you're here to know about, what makes R2 different and harder than R1. I will give you tips and tricks based on my own preparation and also my many years of teaching GEP students. And last but not least, we'll look at some Think Academy programs that you can participate in for free if you are one of our existing students. So let's start, right? When is the GEP selection round this year? Many of you have seared this date into your brain, right? So the English is on 14th October 2025, and the math is on 15th October 2025. Both of these tests take place in one long sitting in the morning. A lot of parents think that general ability is a standalone test. It is not, all right? It's split into your 2 sections, GA1, which is your English GA, and GA2, which is your math GA, and they are together with their respective English and math papers. And the time split between the subject and GA vary year to year. So sometimes you have a longer like subject paper, sometimes you have a longer GA paper. It just depends on what the MOE is feeling that year, and you get like a split of questions. It could be 30-70, it could be 40-60, it could be 80-20. It just depends. All right, so depends on how lucky you are. Now, a little bit more about round two. As you know, right, every year about 1% of P3 students pass the selection round into the GEP. So just statistically, if your child passes round one, all right, then 1 in 10 kids will be selected into round two. So don't worry, all right, if you found the paper difficult, everybody will find the paper pretty difficult, all right? So as long as you do better than 9 other people, you are pretty much guaranteed to get into round two, though that itself is no easy feat, right? And so from here, they have a 1 in 10 chance. And that means every year, there's about 400 to 500 students getting into the GEP, right? You will go through this process. The test takes part in late October. You get your results and the offer letters in early November. And then afterwards, you have to make the decision, right, between the 9 primary schools. If you get in, great. If you don't, you have some chance to appeal for your preferred school. Some parents and students already have schools in mind. You know what you want, right? If you don't, just pick the school nearest to your house, I suppose, right? And the last few months are for you to prepare your child for the change in environment. So these are the 9 primary schools offered. I'm sure you already know about them, right? How are you guaranteed to get into the school? It depends on 3 things, right? Number 1 is the proximity to your house. Number 2, right, of course, whether you are maybe contributing to the school in some way by participating in famous CCAs. Or third, it depends on the culture, right? Some schools are like SAP schools, special arts program, some genders. Obviously, if you're a boy, right, you'll be looking at the boys' schools. And also know that you have the option to reject the GEP if you or your child change their mind. So, halfway through, I've had personally a lot of classmates, not a lot maybe, but at least, close to 10 people, right, from back then who really considered or ended up withdrawing from the GEP halfway. So if you do withdraw, that's okay, right? You just end up in the mainstream program, but you're still in the top school. It's not like the school's going to kick you out, right? You just withdraw from GEP, but you're not withdrawing from the school. So that's something to consider. The GEP provides an excellent opportunity for you to change to a much better school. And I mean, it is the last year that this program takes place, so those of you in P3, you should treasure this opportunity while you can. Who knows what they're going to do next year to make you guys transfer schools in primary school. So now, I think this is what you guys are interested in, right? So how is the selection round really different from round 1? What are the key differences to look out for? And what really is tested in this elusive, paper that nobody really knows any information about? So let's start by talking about time management, right? In round 1, you already saw that the papers were pretty long, and if you ask your kids, I bet a lot of them came home like incredibly tired, and they're like, oh, mommy, daddy, I don't want to talk about this. I'm too tired. Round 2, it's going to be even longer because the overall paper, English plus GA or Math plus GA, are going to be about 2.5 hours each. All right, you get a little break in between, but it's not a significant break, maybe like 20 minutes. So can your kids sit still for 2.5 hours to do a paper? By the time they do the second half of the paper, a lot of them will already be very wiped out. And this is really where students who undergone intensive training, like you attend 2.5-hour math or English lessons, or you've been through mock tests, or you attended math Olympiads, right? You would have this experience of sitting there for a very long time to do the paper. So two most important things, apart from just your general knowledge, are number 1, exam stamina and time management tricks. So if your child does not have much experience taking long exams, I think it's time to start trying to give them some mock papers so that they can simulate this experience before they actually take the test. All right, so that's the most important thing, stamina. That's why I put this first. Whatever you hear next, it's secondary to the fact that your kids need to be able to sit there and think for 2.5 hours. So make sure you give them this opportunity to train for it. Now, let's talk about the content, right? No doubt everybody is curious about exactly what is tested in round 2. Now, I don't claim to be some sort of oracle. I'm not going to tell you exactly what this year's exam is, right? If I did, I'd probably be like arrested the next day or something. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about the past year experiences that I've heard from my students, right? And generally what appears year after year in each of the 4 subjects. So we start first from English. Now, no doubt, right? English is the killer every single year, okay? If you ask all the past year GEP students, whether they found English more difficult or math more difficult, I promise you 80% of them will tell you that the English paper is harder. And this is the unfortunate truth that year after year, the MOE is just making the English paper harder and harder because you know why? It's difficult to prepare for English, right? So that's okay. Okay, you know what? It's too late. English is already pretty much fixed. So what you can do now is to tell your kids more about what the English paper is like, give them some mental preparation. But you know, if your kid has not done much English practice or does not read much, it's really not a very useful thing to do like tons of English papers in the last month. All right, the rate of improvement is too slow. Nonetheless, I will tell you more about the English paper. Number 1, you have vocabulary, about 20 to 30 MCQ questions every year. Number 2, closed passages. This part is the pretty like killer part, all right? A lot of students find the closed passage section really, really difficult because there's 4 to 5 fill in the blank passages. And hear this out, all right? Not every year do you get helping words. Like sometimes in school, right, you'll see closed passages, but they give you like words to choose from on top, right? There have been years in the GEP where you get no helping words. So you have to think of like the word on your own. And that is pretty difficult. And last but not least, of course, you have your classic, your comprehension. But the problem is the comprehension passages are coming from a lot of various genres. You know how recently there's been a few like parents who wrote into 早报 or to like the newspaper to talk about the oral that happened. And then the parents basically said that this year's oral was really unfair because my child might not have, you know, these experiences like going to the theme parks in Singapore, right? Or queuing for something. So they have nothing to talk about. Well, bad news for you, right? GEP is definitely going to be about something that your kid might not have experiences on. So hear this, what kind of passages or reading can come out? Well, from the past years, right, the selection have ranged from like pretty crazy stuff. You have history. So the passage talked about the Temple of Artemis, right? It's architecture, it's history. Some students probably don't even know who Artemis is. You know, Artemis, the Greek goddess of archery. Yeah, so this is a pretty obscure topic. There's also been science, right? So it was the US-Russia space race during the Cold War. Again, a very obscure topic. And back in, I think this was like 2020 or 2021, parents were pretty shocked and kids were pretty shocked because there was a poem that came out, specifically this poem, The Ballad of Rum. Now, how many of your kids have even read a poem in their lives, right? Like, honestly, when I was in P3, I've never read a poem, okay? So if this came out, I would have been like very shook, very shocked because it's not something I've been exposed to. So a lot about English is about, you know, exposing your child to a wide variety of reading. And if you do get into the GEP, you are expected to read widely. And most of your English classes will revolve around writing, creative writing on various genres. So it kind of flows. If your child is good at reading, you get into the GEP, you're probably going to be pretty good at GEP English. All right, so apart from comprehension, of course, there's also vocab. Now, if you have a look at these 3 words, these came out in past year GEP round 2 papers: frivolous, aberration, fluctuate. You guys know the meaning of these words? Well, regardless, right, parents who set for the exam have generally pitched the English level to be about secondary school. So recently, it's been about like secondary 1-ish level. But I think one good way to test if your kids are prepared is to flip through some of the P6, like prelim or PSLE. They have these vocab questions in their assessment books, right? See if your kids can do them. If they can, then they are pretty prepared. If not, don't worry, all right? You can still read the question, and a lot of the times you can infer the meaning of these words from the questions. So that will also really help. But apart from just really big words, you also have to know the special meaning of certain words, even if they're easy. Like, can anyone find a word that means both rod and prevent? So there was this question, I think a few years, this might have been from GA actually. right, that talked about synonyms, and rod and prevent are two very different words. But there is a very simple word that means both of them. And if you guys know, the word is bar, okay, B-A-R. Very simple word, but you need to know the obscure meanings of these words. So again, a very wide test of students' vocabulary skills. So that's a little bit about English, all right? Well, like I said, English is pretty difficult, but also it's not very sensible to spend the last month preparing for English unless you're really confident in everything else, because it is hard to improve English in the span of 1 month. Now, let's talk about GA1, right? I think this is a little bit more preparable for, just because GA1 is very obscure. Like, it's a part of English that most of your kids have probably never seen before. And GA1 usually comes in 4 big topics. Number 1, word relation. Number 2, anagrams. Number 3, decoding. And number 4, logic. All right, so these are the 4 big parts. Now, let me give you a little bit more information on each of these. Number 1, word relation. So a question like this: Superman is serving you in a restaurant. If hero is to justice, then Superman is too. Well, this question is confusing, right? Because isn't Superman a hero? So shouldn't he also be justice? Well, the fact is, heroes carry out justice, right? Their jobs revolve around justice. But for this specific question, they told you that Superman is serving you in a restaurant. So what is Superman doing? What is his job revolving around? Not justice, but service, right? So the answer to this question, it was an MCQ question, is service. Now, what about anagrams? This part seems deceptively easy, all right? But let me tell you, anagrams every year is ultra difficult, even for you and me, all right? Some parents, if you're watching, you can see whether you know these anagrams. Heart. Can y'all think of another 5-letter word that you can create using the letters of heart? H-E-A-R-T. Maybe you can ask your kids, can they think of any word that heart can create? So this one's not too bad. You know why? Because you can just take the H and you move it to the back, right? Like Scrabble. If you take the H and move it to the back, what do you get? You get earth, all right? So that is, heart is an anagram for earth. Now, what about crate? Right? This one, I'm not going to spend too much time. You can think about it, okay? What can crate create? I'll give you a hint. It starts with a T. Anyway, all right, that's anagram. So what else do we have? Decoding, right? Like if A is 1, B is 2, how do we code blue? This is like a super easy version. Of course, during your real GA, you're not going to have such an easy question. They will try to jumble up the letters and numbers a little bit more. And the last part is what actually many students who are good at math can also do. Let's see this question. All birds lay eggs. The mysterious Mughal, it doesn't actually exist. It's just a random thing. All right, the mysterious Mughal also lays eggs. The mysterious Mughal is a bird. True or false? What do you guys think? Is this true? Is this false? Ask your kids. Actually, right, a lot of people might think, oh, it's true because the Mughal lays eggs, so it must be a bird. But in reality, it's false, right? Because it says all birds lay eggs, but that is a one-sided relationship. Right? This is the inverse. Is the inverse true? If you lay eggs, are you a bird? Well, no, right? Because platypus also lay eggs, right? Fish also lay eggs. So the mysterious Mughal may not be a bird, hence it is false. All right, so this is like a logical thinking kind of questions that are also very popular in GA. Now, let me show you examples of like 2 more specific questions that really show you what exactly to expect, right? Like this one. Choose the correct group of words for sweat. I'll pause here for a bit, take 10 seconds, think about it, right? Like, what group of words is going to be related to sweat? You guys might think, asthma and flu, I mean, yeah. Like when you have the asthma and when you have the flu, surely you sweat, right? So it's pretty related. Spotty and freckled. Is this like stuff on your face? Sweat, spots, freckles, maybe? Tear and saliva, celery and sweet, blood and digestive juice. So the actual answer for this question is C, tear and saliva. Do you know why? Because they are all words that are created by your 5 senses, right? Your skin, sense of touch, produces sweat. Your eyes, your sense of sight, produces tears. And your mouth, your sense of taste, produces saliva. So the answer to this question was C. Now, every year, students argue about GA with me, especially when I teach our GA classes, right? Every year, I get students who say like, oh, Teacher Bell, it's A, right? It's B. I mean, these all make sense. How do you know C is the answer? Well, the thing is, in GA, a lot of the times there are multiple answers, but you have to pick the one with the most common sense. Now, how do you know that you have the most common sense? Well, that's up to the examiner, right? If the examiner thinks you have common sense, then you have common sense. That is just something to note about GA. There might be multiple answers, but only one is the most sensible answer. What about this one? Okay, this one has really only one answer. All right, wild blank works. What does this even mean? Wild what works? Are we looking at a pattern here? So does anyone know what the answer is for this? It's pretty cool, actually, right? This is wildfire. Wildfire is a word. Fireworks is a word. So the answer is actually B. You're looking at something that can link the front and the back, right? So not only do you have to know the meaning of these words, you also have to understand what the question is asking, right? Are they asking for a pattern? Are they asking for something to link the words? So GA not only requires you to have a good grasp of English, it also requires you to be exposed to these kind of questions. So make sure you get some practice before you go in so you're not completely blinded. All right, now let's talk about math. I'm going to spend a bit less time on this because I think most parents, you especially if you've sit in Think Academy's classes, right, you're probably quite prepared for math. At least you know like what math is going to be like. So every year, all right, math, 50 to 80 questions, be prepared, all right? 80 questions in 60 minutes is no laughing matter. You have very little time to solve each question. So what do you expect? Higher order thinking, a lot of questions require multiple steps and deeper understanding of the question. So if you see word problems, a lot of them might be long word problems. So, well, indirectly, you need English to do well here as well. So see, right? In the screening round, a lot of stuff that you learned was also stuff that was tested in school, right? Like your equivalent substitution or age problems, or maybe like simple fractions. A lot of your kids have already learned this in school. But in the selection round, there are potentially new topics, right? Like distance, speed problems, like that's a P6 topic. But yes, it has come out in selection round, right? There's logical reasoning, which many schools don't teach yet. There's assumption problems, which some schools only teach in primary 4. So do expect that you're still within the realm of primary school mathematics, but they will be taking topics from P4 to P6. And the large reason for this is because if your child actually gets into GEP, the amount of time they spend learning school math is very little compared to the amount of time they spend learning math that is well outside of school math. So I distinctly remember when I was in P4 and P5, we had like this entire semester that was just dedicated to investigative mathematics. You know what's that? It's like a pattern. So they make you investigate some like pattern stuff, you know, those kind of like triangle questions with how many white triangles, how many black triangles. And we had a whole like WA that was just about that. There was like another investigative module on like ancient math numerals. So we learned about Roman numerals, the ancient Mayan kind of like letters or something. Yeah, I mean, it's been a while, right? But if your kids do get into GEP, you can expect that they're going to spend a lot of time not learning school math because you already expected to know it. So in round 2, you will learn a lot of things from P4 to P6. If you don't know any of these topics, feel free to browse through some assessment books, right? A lot of these stuff like assumption problems, area and parameter, you can prepare for early. So let me show you a couple of a more in-depth look into some of these questions. A lot of them require heuristics, right? Which is a problem-solving or self-discovery technique, which involves a method that may not be super fast, but you need to draw conclusions, right? So in the GEP, these 4 sections are the most important out of this heuristic process: looking for patterns, working backwards, acting it out, and restate the problem. So it depends on how good your kids are at reading the questions and also getting all the information that they need from the questions. Now, why is the heuristic and problem-solving process so important? It's because if you look at some example questions, right, in the screening round, the questions are pretty simple. Like, if you look at this square and triangle question, you don't need much to identify the answer, right? So obviously, square is either 5 or it could be 6, right? But what about your triangle? Well, you can think about it, right? Like It's not that difficult, but for the selection round, you can see here, there's a lot more shapes coming into play. If your triangles, your square, diamonds, circles, and you have to think a lot in order to come up with a solution. Some of you can have a look at this. Maybe you can try it out. All right, so similar topics, but there is an increase in difficulty. And also, the questions in the second round require a lot more thought. So some of them will require like multiple different topics. Like in this case, not only must you know about area, right? You also have to know about fractions. So a lot of them require many different topics coming together in a singular question. So that's where your heuristics and problem solving skills come in. But if you want to know more about the math papers, right, we do provide many mock tests in the upcoming month. So if you're interested in math, if you sign up for our mock test, your kids will be more than prepared going in, all right? There's all sorts of question tests that you will be exposed to, like easily 20 or 30 different topics. So yeah, math, problem solved, just come for our mock tests, you'll be ultra prepared. All right, and what about GA2? GA2 is another one of those things where you parents or you students might not know that much about, all right? It's more or less like an IQ quiz. So if your kids have ever sat for the Mensa exam, or if they've ever done any IQ test questions, your GA2 questions are very likely similar. The structure, again, varies from year to year, especially in the recent years. They're coming up with more and more, right, strange and obscure questions just to, make sure that your kids are exposed to something new during the paper. It's known to range from 30 to 40 questions. And to be honest, I think GA2 is one of those things where if you're not exposed to it, it's very, very, very easy to improve on. So if your kids have never done GA2, highly, highly recommend them to spend some time before the round 2 to look at GA2, because from 0 to hero, you improve in this subject super fast. All right, so what do you expect in GA2? Some things, patterns, spatial awareness, logical reasoning, right? So these are like some different kinds of questions, like nets questions, right? You also have logical reasoning, like weights. These are more like tangential to math. So if you're good at math, you're very likely also pretty good at these kind of topics. Of course, there are a bit more obscure questions out there, especially pattern questions like this one. A lot of students, the moment they see this question, boom, right? There's too much information. What are we looking for? But don't worry, right? The more kind of questions you do for this, the more easy you will feel that this is. Just look for simple patterns. All right, the children are 9 or 10 years old. They might test pretty obscure things, but usually in the GA paper, there will be at most 1 or 2 things that are changing in the question. In this particular case, look at it closely. I'll give you guys 20 seconds to think about it. If you kids are looking at it, try telling your parents what the answers are, or try figuring out yourself, right? Because this is genuinely a question that came out. Like if you know this question, it's a good sign. You can do something in your GA2. Yeah, so I hope you guys observe the pattern. All right, what's going on? Apart from just the shapes that are changing, if you look across every single row, you will see that the shapes are rotating, right? They are rotating clockwise, 90 degrees clockwise, then another 90 degrees clockwise. So if you look at the third row, right, you would expect the answer to be either D or E. But is it D or E? Then you have to look at the middle arrow, right? You see that if you rotate it clockwise, your right arrow is going to be on the right. And so the answer is E and not. Okay, so this one, the answer is E. Hope you guys got it correct. Now, let's look at one more. What about this one? Okay, this one, not that difficult. Again, looks confusing. I'll give you guys 20 seconds to think about it. Any thoughts? Feel free to share your answers with your parents, all right? Or if you're a parent, you can see if your kid solves it faster than you. Yeah, so the answer for this one is C. Why is it C? Because in every other shape, you see that the 2 small shapes on the top and bottom, right? You have like, say, D, you have a triangle and a square, right? Then your middle shape is inverted. So your square is on the outside and your triangle's on the inside. But the only odd one out is C, because the outer shapes have a triangle and a circle, but the middle shape is a circle and a square, right? So it is the odd one out. It doesn't follow the rest of the patterns, and so C is our answer. All right. Now, with that, Right, guys? Wait, okay, one more. Okay, last one. This one is like more or less math. More or less math. I mean, I hope you know the math part. You should probably also know the English part because I think most of you know your alphabets, right? If you don't know it, just sing it to yourself. So what is this? Okay, yeah. So I'm sure many of this one's easy. Okay, I really hope that if your kid is looking to get into GEP, that they can solve this one. Yeah, what is the alphabet pattern? A, B, C, skip D, E. Right? And then skip F. What's after that? G. And skip H, I, blah, blah, blah. Right? So you know that the letter, the first one is G, which gives you A or C. And then the number, like this one's easy. So square numbers, 81, 64, 49. Next one is 6 square, which is 36. So the answer is 8. All right, this one, if it came out, I think for most of our existing students, this should be a giveaway. All right, hopefully you guys managed to get it. So the answer is 8. Anyway, these are all GA2 or GA math kind of questions, right? Hopefully, you are exposed to these questions. If not, don't worry, all right? We also have GA tests coming up, which are also free for our long-term course students. So if you found yourself struggling or if you're having fun, like these questions are ultra fun. Okay, my favorite out of the 4 is GA2. If you find it fun, go for the mock test. I think you'll like the questions, honestly. If you guys like Math Olympiad, this is like right up your alley. All right, so let's move on. Okay, let's maybe talk a little bit about math in general. So if you want to prepare for math, most of these questions are a mixture of 3 things: brain teasers, PSLE, and Math Olympiad. I think right now, if you are attending our classes or you're just doing math in school, you're probably at least exposed to the bottom 2, right? PSLE and Math Olympiad. I think the thing that most students need to brush up on is the top section, brain teasers, right? If you think that GA2 looks completely foreign to you, please, please, please spend some time on GA2. It is literally, all right, the easiest subject to improve on. If you spend a little bit of time exposing yourself to the questions, you'll reap a lot of benefits. All right, I'll talk about this later as well. What is the best way to prepare in the last month? So speaking of preparation, right, what do we do in the next 2 months? Well, I guess next 1.5-ish, right? How do we use this precious little time left to help our kids, or if you're a kid, help yourself to be as prepared as possible? So first, English. Okay, let me just put it out here. Like I said, I've taught both GEP math and English in the past, so I think I am pretty qualified to talk about this. And well, I've also taken 3 years of GEP math and English and sat for the exam myself. So I do want to say that for English, if you're really confident in the other 3 subjects, like your GA1, 2, and your math, sure, spend time on English. But you also only have 1 month. It's pretty much a miracle if you can pull your English up a lot in 1 month. All right, so unless you're hyper confident in the other 3, I think maybe for English, we try to spend a little bit less time on it. Of course, if you do want to spend time, here's my advice, right? Number 1, time management. You should get plenty of practice to build up your reading stamina because in the comprehension section, you are going to be reading 4 to 5 passages in a row. All right, that's a lot. A lot of students are tired by the time they get to the 2nd and 3rd passage. So can you read between the lines even when you're tired? Well, guys, if you want to find out, try to sit for some mock tests. All right, where do you find these mock tests? I'm not sure if we're preparing any English mock tests this year, but I think if you want to try it out, get your kids to do some P6 prelim papers, especially the comprehension section. If they can master these passages well, I think it's a good sign for them. All right, so that's time management. It's really only built upon reading a lot and trying out using mock papers to assess your kids. And number 2, all right, more importantly, when we talk about time management during the test itself, generally, I recommend that you start with the comprehension because every year they jumble up the sequence, right? Some years have vocab first, some years have compre first. For me, I think your kids should start with comprehension because those parts require the most brain power. But every year, I run into students who struggle with time management, like they cannot finish the English paper. If you do a couple of mock tests and you find that that is your main problem, you struggle with time management, then my advice for you becomes the inverse. If you struggle with time management, do the vocab section first. Why? Because that is the highest marks per minute, right? You just have to read 1 line to get your 1 mark. For your comprehension, you have to read the whole passage to get your 1 mark. right? So if you struggle with time management, do the vocab first, okay? So to summarize for you, if you're very fast, do the comprehension first. If you're not very fast, do the vocab first. So that's a little bit about English. All right, and also, what are you actually going to do in this month? Read widely, right? Read during your leisure time, but treat it more seriously. If you're reading Harry Potter, don't just read for the sake of reading, right? If you don't know a word, highlight it or bookmark it and look it up in the dictionary. Or you can ask your parents if you're a kid, right? And for parents, a lot of students hate reading because they don't like doing it alone. When I was younger, I hated reading, but my mom sat with me to go through books every night because I came to Singapore from China when I was about like 5. So you can imagine, even when I was 7 or 8, my English is probably not that great, right? So my mom really sat with me every single night to read all these, like, those, at that time, we have stuff like Animorphs, right? Harry Potter, like we read all these books together and we looked up words together because I'm gonna be real, her English is not the best either. So I felt like we were learning together and I was more eager to read. So for your kids, if your kids don't like reading, right, I think one advice I can give to you as parents as well is to read together with your kids to build reading comprehension and make it more fun. So yeah, that's something for English, right? Just read widely, do some practice papers, figure out your strengths and weaknesses. Now for math, this thing is very easy to improve on. Even in this 1 month, if you sit for many mock papers, I promise you your math results will improve. All right, so if your kids find math pretty difficult or there's room for improvement for them in math, please do spend some time in math. All right, so speed. As we mentioned just now, you have an hour to do like 60 or 80 questions. So ultra important. You got to be fast and you got to be accurate. So practice, practice, practice. If your kids are not great with calculation or the basic times table, that's like the fundamentals, okay? That's like the basic. They must know the times table at least up to 12 times 12. You can start quizzing them. Make sure that if you're a kid, right, make sure your calculation is good for the times and division tables. If you're a parent, right, when your kids are, going to school or when they're eating, feel free to throw them some questions, at least just for these last few months up to GEP. Make sure they're good at calculation. Right? And also familiarity. If your kids have seen a question before, they're more likely to be able to solve it, which is, again, where I can plug our practice papers, right? Across the 7 mock papers we prepare, there are more than like 100, 200 questions. If you do all these 200 questions, that will at least be many questions that appear actually in the GEP round 2. All right, so if you're not familiar with math, go and get practice. Where can you get practice? With Think Academy. I'll tell you guys more later. All right, so also exposure to exam questions. I talked about this just now, so I'm going to skip this. All right, make sure you are familiar with the commonly tested selection round topics like number patterns, combinatorics, speed, fractions, right? If you're not, get more practice. So that's about math, right? And most importantly, many students suffer every year, even though they're good at math. Why? Because you don't check your answers. All right, every year, students who are good at math, right, flunk the math exams because GEP math is somewhat easier than Math Olympiad. If you've taken like SESMO or even ANMO's papers, you have definitely set for questions that are harder than the GEP math questions. So for GEP math, how do you make sure you do well? You got to be careful, right? Because the questions are difficult, but they're not like the ultra high-end Math Olympiad questions. Every student who has exposure to Math Olympiad can do decently well for math. So how do you make sure you stand out or you don't fall behind? Check your work. Make sure whatever you can do is correct, right? So working backwards, substitution, estimation, these are all methods you can use to check your work. Can I just make a special plug for estimation here? Seriously, every year when I teach math, there will be students coming up with crazy answers. You know how age problems is tested in GEP every year? So I give age problems as part of our mock tests. Almost every year I set them. And there will be students telling me that, say, like this parent in the question is 351 years old. Bro, better be less than 100 or maybe 120 since the oldest guy nowadays is 114. So yeah, it has to be reasonable, right? If they ask you the mass of an apple, I hope you don't get something like 2,000 kilograms. So estimation is the fastest and most sensible way to check your answer. Please make sure that your kids are exposed to these common checking techniques. Now, lastly, let's talk about some general tips and tricks, right? So before the exams, these are some things you can help your kids with, right? Number one, please eat and sleep. The GEP test is important, but it's also not the end of the world, right? If you ask me, I think the most telling example is maybe I'll tell you guys about out of the students who I would say got into Princeton during my year, there are 6 Singaporeans who got in. Only 2 of them were from GEP, me and another student. 4 of them were not. So yes, GEP is important, right? But it's also not the end of the world, right? If you don't get in, doesn't mean, your primary school life is going to collapse and shatter into pieces. So yeah, please do treat it like an exam, but still treat it normally. Eat and sleep, eat a nutritious meal in the morning. And also, if I remember correctly, you are allowed to eat in the little break between your English and GA sections. So make sure you pack something for your kids, right? They can eat. Also de-stress. So yeah, don't be overly worried about it. It can have a negative impact on exam conditions. The same advice I give my kids for math Olympiads, right? You are going to do your best if you are relaxed and thinking during the exam. If you're too panicked, you're not going to do well. All right, so as a parent, please do not stress your kid overly for this exam, right? Like the GEP, again, is important, right? But I think your kids, right, are more important. So yeah, I think it's a good form of exposure. The journey matters more than the result. And last but not least, luck does play a very, very, very large part in GEP admissions. All right, so if you ask yourself, oh, how come I didn't get in, but someone I knew got in? Or how come I got in, but someone I know is really smart didn't get in? This is one of the factors, right? Luck. A lot of the GEP questions are MCQ questions. Right, so if you roll your lucky dice and you get every question correct, congratulations, right? You win based on your luck skill. Or some students are even better. Before they go for English, they just so happen to read the exact same poem or the exact same passage. Congratulations, you're getting in by luck, right? So luck is a very large factor as well. Right? Feel free to roll a dice during the exam or carry your lucky item. Now, this is one of, I think, the most important slides I can share with you. In the next month, what do I think is the best marks per effort spent? In my opinion, GA2 is what you guys should spend your time on because most students are not familiar with this subject, right? So even if you study a little bit for it, you do a little bit of revision, your initial improvement is going to go like zoom. Okay, so based on parent feedback and also our experiences with like 5-6 years of GEP prep, the difficulty between preparing for each subject varies. But if you are hugging Buddha's feet, right, if you're doing last minute preparation, GA2 is the highest marks per minute spent. Followed by math, unless you're already very good at math, right, then you can skip this. And then you can do GA1, which is your English GA. And last but not least, if you're confident in everything else, right, you can also spend time in English. Read widely, build up your vocab bank. All right, so I think that's more or less the content that I have. And I talked a lot about our math and GA papers, right? So here I will share with you some of the resources that we have for you. Even just by watching this seminar, I think our team has prepared a lot of free resources that you can get access to, right? So feel free to ask in chat about our WhatsApp and WeChat groups. I think our lovely Think Academy assistants will be happy to provide you with the resources that we're offering everyone to give you some leg up on exposure to the competition or to the GEP test. So this is our plan, all right, for the next year. It's pretty crazy. Not next year, next month. Looking at this makes me think it's a year because there's just so much, right? But there's a lot of resources we've prepared for you within the next month or so, right? You can see almost every day we're preparing some mock tests for you and your child. Of course, please do not think like you have to participate in all of these, all right? If you do, you will be more than prepared to do well in GEP round 2. All right, but I also understand many of your kids are going to school and you have your school exams, right? So do as much as you can, okay? As much as you're comfortable with. So this is what we've prepared over the next month or so. You can see that some of these are like online, right? So most of the stuff from Tuesday to Friday, because your kids do go to school, right? Most of the Tuesday to Friday stuff are online. But the weekend stuff, you can see here, we have some offline exams. I think this is probably what I would recommend you or your child try to sit in for, like these offline stuff, right? Because the real test, as you know, is offline. So this provides the best, I would say, window into how prepared your kids are for the exam. So when we do release these, try to get a seat, right? These offline exams. The online ones, of course, also provide exposure to various kinds of questions, various topics that are going to come out. Yeah, if you want to know like how exactly you get access to these programs, what you can do is to look at this page. All right, so the entire package is $499 for the whole month. You saw like almost every day there's a mock test. So there's 7 sets of round 2 math mock test papers and detailed run-throughs. Right, it's a 420 question GA bank. This is ultra useful, all right, because GA resources out there are very, very scarce. And these bank is what we've collected, right, based on many years of collecting questions from our students and also, right, doing our own research into general ability. There are 7 GA lessons, right, 2 or 3 hours, and also 3 large-scale offline mock tests and round-the-clock guidance and support from our GEP teachers. But here's the catch. If you're a long-term class student, which many of you are, you get the whole package for free. All right, so if you guys are with us in term 4, this whole thing is free. All of the classes are already tied to your account. But for students not with us, don't worry, right? You can sign up for term 4 classes right now. And you see, if you sign up for the online version, right, it's only $600. Not only do you get all these classes, you also get the entire $500 package on the previous page, right? So if you're interested in learning math ahead, I highly recommend maybe you just sign up for the term 4 classes instead. So all of these, the first 5 lessons at least, are very relevant to GEP, right? You can see sum and difference, age problems, inclusion, exclusion. These are all topics that are taught or tested in the GEP round 2. If you want more information about our classes, feel free to click on the links sent out in the chat boxes, right? Join our WhatsApp and WeChat group to learn more. So I think that's pretty much I have to share with you guys today, right? I think it was about 50 minutes or so. So in the last 10 or so minutes, maybe I can answer some of your questions about the GEP, right? If you guys have questions, feel free to type it into the chat as well. So anyone has questions for me that you would like me to answer? Maybe our lovely Think Academy assistants. If you do see that parents have any questions, feel free to type it into our chat box on this Zoom meeting so that I can have a look at it as well. All right, so let's see. Okay, I see that some questions are typed in the chat. Oh, somebody said crate is trace. Oh my God, I just saw that. Good job. All right, yeah, anagrams are hard. I see you got that correct. GA2 is math GA and GA1 is English GA. That's right. All right, so again, a lot of parents have the misconception that GA is a big paper. It's not, okay? It's split into 2 sections. You have your GA sneakily tacked at the back of each English and math day. So not only do you get to do the actual subject, you have to do the GA at the back. All right. So any other questions? If you want to know more about the GEP itself, also feel free to type in the chat box. All right. So I'm happy to share with you more about my experiences as well. GEP, I mean, it was a good time, but it was also a stressful time. I think there was a lot of, I mean, I'm sure you parents also have your own like chat groups where you know that GEP, they have a lot of stuff that are unexpected, especially for kids going in. All right, any other questions? Let me see. Yeah, if you guys are interested in the GEP preparation and GEP extra GEP GA questions, all right, we will be sending out access to these resources into the group, right? Yes, we do have some free resources available, of course. All right, I think the mock tests will be the best way to access these questions, right? So if you're interested, please do sign up into our WhatsApp groups to find out more. The weekend purple mock tests, they are only accessible to students who participate in the full program. So it is like an entire, I think, 24 lesson, if I'm not wrong, program. It's part of the $499. However, do note that the weekend in-person mock tests have limited seating, right? So we will send out the link into the respective groups. So if you're interested, look out for those links and try to sign up early. They're all within the pack. Yeah, again, it's totally free for current students. So if you're our long-term course students, your P3 teachers will be in touch with you every time a new program gets released. Any other questions? Sit here for a couple more minutes, all right? If there's no more questions, then I guess you guys are free to go. Is English comprehension MCQ or open-ended? Most of it is MCQ. All right, there have been, I think, 1 year or two where, if I remember correctly, there was open-ended, but most of the questions are MCQ questions. Let's see. Does every student get the same paper, or students may get different papers? So the papers generally are the same. However, all right, the questions will be scrambled. And yes, some questions will be different, all right? Especially for math and also math GA, you can expect the questions to be scrambled, and there may be questions some people have, but others don't. So yes, there will be a couple of different questions. Yeah, if you guys have like questions about the programs or the classes, feel free to ask in the WhatsApp group, right? Our Think Academy assistants will be happy to tell you more about how to sign up or about what other promotions we have available for you. Do you need to show workings for math? I don't think so. No, just the answer is fine. Okay. I assume that's all the questions. Any last minute questions? Else do you have? Okay, wait, let me see. If you don't take the 499 package, can you still pay for the 3 weekend mock tests? I think I don't think so, but you can ask in the group. All right, our Think Academy assistants will be happy to tell you more. Yeah. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. All right, thank you guys for coming to the GEP seminar. Of course, if you do have further questions, feel free to ask in our group at any time. All right, I'll be happy to answer your questions there and also share more about the tests as well as the GEP itself. All right, hopefully the seminar was helpful to you and you had a good time solving some of the questions. All right, so okay, wait, let me see. Who will be the invigilator? Not your school teacher, probably a teacher from the school that you're assigned to. So you guys know that you're not taking GEP round 2 in your own school. Yeah, for most of you, your GEP round 2 will be in some other school that you have to travel to during the day of your test. So your invigilator is not going to be a teacher that you're familiar with, yeah? Okay. All right. So if there's no more questions, then I will call it here for today. All right. Thank you all for coming to our seminar. And if you do have further questions, feel free to ask in the group. I'll be happy to answer you. All right. Hopefully it was helpful for you guys. And yeah, happy preparation, everybody. And wish you guys all the best of luck. All right. For our round 2 exam. May the GEP, right? Whatever, smile upon you guys, and hopefully everyone achieves good results. So thank you very much for coming to the seminar, and have a good night. If you guys, again, if you have any questions, feel free to join the WhatsApp groups, and I'll be happy to share more. All right, thank you all. All right, thank you. Goodbye.